And welcome everyone. Good morning. It's so wonderful to see all of you here with us to talk about capital growth, the road to scalability and sustainability for minority-owned businesses. We are thrilled to be here this morning, partnering on this series with GNO Inc. And so I am going to start us off, kick us off, but I want to welcome you all. This is going to be, in what I believe is a very timely conversation, one that we, really started last year with thinking about how COVID-19 has impacted minority-owned businesses disproportionately. And so this is a great time to start off the year with thinking about how can minority-owned businesses access additional opportunities. How can minority-owned businesses position themselves to really leverage the many resources that are available, again, as it relates to the economic climate that we're in. And so, again, I want to welcome you all. Please feel free to jot down your questions. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions at the end. You can put them in the chat or the questions box. Again, as Erica mentioned, on your GoToWebinar control panel. Again, I want to thank GNO Inc. for this opportunity. I also want to thank our sponsors for this series, Coaxum Enterprises, in addition to Fidelity Bank's Power Program. And so you'll hear from representatives from those organizations throughout the series. But again, I want to thank them for their support. And again, thank GNO Inc. for this opportunity to partner. But we know that minority-owned businesses are really drivers, and all small businesses are drivers of our economy. But we know that minority-owned businesses have a unique opportunity to contribute to wealth creation in our communities. And so I want to be very clear about this series and what our intention is. Our intention is to provide access to information about the resources that are available and the opportunities that are available, but also, again, how minority-owned businesses can position themselves. So again, if you have questions, please feel free to engage. Please feel free to let us know. We have a wonderful panel here today. In just a couple of minutes, I want to introduce the panel and get started with our discussion. But before I do that, I want to provide an opportunity for Greater New Orleans Inc. and Coaxum Enterprises to share some welcome remarks with y'all. And with that, I want to hand over to Ms. Jasmine Brown from Greater New Orleans Inc. to provide some introductory remarks. Jasmine?
Good morning, everyone. We are so grateful that you all have joined. As Classy said, I am Jasmine Brown. I am the Public Policy Manager here at GNO Inc. I am actually one of the leaders of our organization's Economic Mobility Action Plan. I'll hand it over to my boss, my CEO, Michael Heck, now to give some further introductory remarks about our Economic Mobility Action Plan, as well as our position in the series. Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, all right. Well, this is like a fire brigade of speakers, and we want to get to the heat. So I'm going to be super brief. I just wanted to thank you, Classy and Urban League. You're great partners on so many levels, and this is just another example of it. Our economic mobility work at GNO Inc. is basically an action plan for Black wealth creation in the region. And as a former small business owner myself, and somebody who's been involved in small business going back to really my work in New York City after 9/11. I know how hard it can be, and getting access to capital is kind of one of the primary challenges. We also know that coming through COVID, that the pre-existing challenges and disparities have been exacerbated, have been exposed, and they're now more acute than ever. But what I feel good about is I know that the group of banks and lenders and experts we have on this call today from Regions and from Hope and from Hancock, Whitney, and Gulf Coast Bank are as able and activated as any in the country to both give you advice and to be your partners. So excited to hear what they have to say. But I'm going to turn it over to my old friend. By old, I mean many years. We've known each other. Quentin Messer from the New Orleans Business Alliance to say some remarks on behalf of Coaxum Enterprises. Quentin?
Thank you, Michael. Clearly, I'm not Henry Coaxum Jr. Mr. Coaxum regrets that he's not able to attend, but I'm honored to provide a few comments. Henry has been a mentor, a role model. He was the founding board member of the New Orleans Business Alliance, the organization which I have the privilege to work. He's been a board member of GNO Inc. He's been a contributor and board member of the Urban League of Louisiana. And so when Henry was asked about this opportunity, he instinctually raised his hand and said, yes, he would do it. And he would do it because, and he probably would tell you this, he remembers when he started off in business. So it'd be before he became a multi-site franchisee for McDonald's, a successful entrepreneur, part of the team that's developing the Four Seasons here in New Orleans, one of the seminal developments of our time. He had to start somewhere. He had to get that friends and family capital. But there wasn't a lot of friends and family capital. He had to go to a bank. He had to sit down and talk to folks. And he understands that, and he's never forgotten that. And Henry likes to say that a rising tide lifts all boats, but that presupposes that everyone has a boat. And everybody has a boat with a motor. Everybody has a boat with working sails. So this is part of his efforts to give back, to continue to help the next generation of successful BIPOC entrepreneurs. I don't want to leave you with a quote that Henry uses in his SIG, his electronic signature, that I think encapsulates why this is so critically important for him. And it's a quote from Winston Churchill, and it says, "It's not enough that we do our best. Sometimes we have to do what is required." This is required. We're grateful to all the institutions represented here. We're grateful to GNO Inc. and to the Urban League of Louisiana for their leadership. Thanks very kindly.
Thank you so much, Quentin. And thank you so much, Michael. Heck, again, we appreciate your support. We appreciate the partnership because, again, I believe that this is actually a wonderful time to be having this conversation at the start of the year, right? Let's move forward with understanding and energizing our minority-owned businesses and equipping them with the resources and the information and the education that they need to have a successful year this year and beyond. And so, again, I feel like this is a fresh start for those that have not been a part of the, access to capital, the preparedness to access to capital conversation before. I want to make sure that you guys understand that this is twofold, right? One is, how do we understand what's happening in the industry so that we can better position ourselves, take advantage of the opportunities? And then what are the actions that we need to take as minority-owned businesses to really prepare ourselves, not when we need it, right, but before we need it, right? And so how do we position ourselves to be economically, financially resilient and ready to access opportunities? The Urban League of Louisiana, when the pandemic started, we had such an influx of clients, new and existing clients that came to us, and what we saw, and one of the outcomes, and I'm not shy about talking about it, is that a lot of our businesses were not prepared to take advantage of, whether it was the EIDL, whether it was the PPP, whether it was even grant opportunities. And so what my mission has been is to make sure that not only do we talk about access to capital, but we also talk about preparedness, right? And the ownership of what is it that we need to do to better position ourselves. And so that's what I want to talk about today. And so again, I'd like to thank all of our guests, and I'm going to, you see on the screen this amazing panel that we have. I'm so thrilled to have representatives from Regions Bank, from Hope Enterprise Corporation, Hope Credit Union, from Hancock Whitney, Gulf Coast Bank and Trust. Again, as Michael mentioned, this is an opportunity to hear directly from these organizations that are in a position to support our small business community. This is the work that they do. And so we want to hear directly from them what their insights are and what they are looking to achieve in terms of small business development as it relates to economic development. So I want to start us off again. You can see here on your screen, but I'm going to have in just a second all of the panelists introduce themselves. But I want to start off with this premise to understand some of the data that we know about what's going on in terms of minority-owned businesses in accessing capital. So let's talk about it. So we know that minority-owned businesses face structural challenges, right? That really underscore the underlying economic fragility of underrepresented groups. We know that as it pertains to Black and Latinx communities, that we have limited access to credit opportunities. And, you know, this, of course, impacts us, especially when we are met with a disaster or some type of event that halts our operations. I want to share with you some data. So there's some information from the Brookings Institute. There was a 2018 Small Business Credit Survey. Again, this is information is even before the pandemic. This is before we got into this phase of emergency. But what the survey found was that large banks approve around 60% of loans for white small business owners, 50% by Hispanic or Latinx small business owners, and just 29% for those sought by Black business owners. There's some more research that found that Black business owners were significantly more likely to be asked to provide information about their personal financials, right? Including personal financial statements and, you know, W-2s, all of those documents when applying for loans, more so than their white small business owners, right? And there are more factors, right? Thinking about credit scores, thinking about, again, the documentation that's provided, there are some disparities. So, but in lieu of these disparities and challenges, right, that our minority-owned businesses face, what I want to do today is talk to our bankers about some practical tactics, right, and steps to address these aspects of bankability. We want to talk about, you know, we've identified what the issue is, right? We've identified what the challenge is. And so what I want to do is talk to our bankers about what is the plan, right? What are some of the action steps? What are some of the things that the industry needs to do to, you know, lessen this gap on these disparities and hopefully eradicate these disparities. So again, this is not there's no overnight fix. Again, we know that these are structural challenges, these are systemic challenges, but we should be able to start the conversation and moving moving towards some steps to address these issues. And then again, what can minority-owned businesses do, right, to position themselves to access capital through these organizations? Again, I want to thank our panelists and give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. What we'll do is we'll start off with Ms. Amy Barton, who's the SBA lending specialist of commercial banking for Regions Bank. And so Amy, you are not able to see Amy, but you can hear her. Amy, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you. First, I want to apologize that you can't see me. I'm trying to get my webcam working, but I'm not sure what's going on with it, so I'll keep trying. I might pop up before the end of the presentation. Just want to thank you so much for allowing Regions to be a part of this today. We're excited to be able to provide any information that we can to all of the participants. And I've been with Regions for about 16 years. Just to give you some background, I've been in banking for over 20. I started out customer service rep and moved on through to branch manager, did that for multiple years at multiple branches, different sizes. Went on to do a market manager role where I helped the branches work with our small business customers to access capital and many other things on the daily running their businesses. And then from there moved into the commercial banking world and worked with different size business banking clients. And then most recently in the last 2 years moved into SBA lending. So I cover the South Louisiana region, which is New Orleans all the way to Lake Charles. And I work with all different sizes of business owners and work through their SBA requests. So you can imagine my life's been a little busy last year and this year, especially with all of the PPP funding that's going on. So working with that as well. And again, just happy to be able to answer some questions and help any of our participants today.
Thank you so much, Amy. And welcome. Again, we appreciate your support in being here this morning. And now we'll kick it over to Mr. Brandon Nelson, who is Senior Vice President for Commercial Lending at Hancock Whitney. Brandon?
Thank you all for having me. Yeah, my name is Brandon Nelson, and I manage the commercial bank and New Orleans team for Hancock Whitney Bank. We're housed right there at the Hancock Whitney Center in the CBD of New Orleans. And I also sit on the Diversity and Inclusion Council for the bank. I've actually been at Hancock Whitney. It'll be 20 years this June, believe it or not, time flies. And I'm happy to represent the bank. We truly have a commitment to small businesses. We have a portfolio of over 1.3 billion in loans to small businesses. That's businesses with revenues with less than $1 million, which actually ranks us at third in our 5-state footprint, with the first 2 banks being substantially larger institutions, as in by multiples. I've had the great fortune of working with Gino Inc. for probably the better part of 7 or 8 years, and Michael Heck as well. I know Quentin very well, and I've gotten to know Henry Coxum also, and I'm certainly a fan of the Urban League of Louisiana. And so I just really appreciative of you all putting this together, and I'm just really excited to be here and to hopefully have some frank conversations so we can tackle this problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brandon. Again, we appreciate your support and being here. Again, yeah, let's have some real conversation to get to, again, moving towards addressing this issue. So thank you for being here. Ms. Kathy Saloy, who is the Senior Vice President for Community Development for Hope Credit Union, Hope Enterprise Corporation. Kathy?
Good morning, and thank you so much for inviting me to join this conversation, and thank you to the sponsors as well. So I'm at Hope Enterprise Corporation, Hope Credit Union, and we're a community development financial institution, which means that we have a mission to work in economically distressed communities. Hope began as a commercial loan fund and have a long track record of supporting businesses with financing to start their business, to stabilize their business, and help their businesses to grow. We work with, we have lots of partnerships and lots of investors to invest in us and to invest in you and small businesses and to meet the needs that you have. We are also an SBA lender. We are very deep into PPP at this time, hoping to get all of you through that need that. We have credit enhancement products, and we constantly work to meet those challenges that Classy just described, and to continue to understand what those challenges are so that we can make sure that we customize our products to do just that and to help you as a small business owner. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Again, I appreciate you being here and supporting the efforts of our small business community and the Urban League of Louisiana as always. So thank you so much for your continued support. And Ms. Tish Sauerhoff, am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
You are, yes, ma'am.
Oh, I got it. So Tish is the Community Reinvestment Act Officer at Gulf Coast Bank and Trust. Tish, again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your support. I'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to the audience.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me. I really appreciate it. So as the Community Reinvestment Officer for the bank, that is the role that's really relevant to the conversation we're having today. But I do have to say I also manage special projects for the bank. So I deal with every division across the board. But as Community Reinvestment Act Officer, I ensure that we as a financial institution are helping to meet the credit needs of our entire community. So we're always looking at the data to see who we are serving and looking for ways we can improve in any underserved areas. Unlike some of your other panelists, I am not a traditional banker. So I served in the Air Force. I have experience in information technology and education, most recently in running a nonprofit. But I think my experience is just one example of how we at Gulf Coast Bank are committed to diversity in the workforce as a local employer. And I'm excited about this conversation today because as a community bank, we bring an entire team of bankers to the table. We make decisions here locally, but I think one of the strongest ways we support small businesses is having an entire division that specializes in SBA loans. And so I look forward to sharing some of that today.
Thank you so much, Tisha. Again, I so appreciate you being here, and you're right. Just to be a part of this conversation, I do, looking forward to your insight from your perspective. And so I want to thank all of you for being here. Again, in our opinion, this is a star-studded panel, right? Because you guys have the experience, right? You guys have the insights into what's going on, again, across the industry within your organizations, again, and then how to support small businesses. So we appreciate you being here. So let's talk about some other data points. There's some other data that shows that 1% of Black business owners get a bank loan in their first year of business. Excuse me. That's compared to 7% of white business owners. Twice as many white business owners use business credit cards during their first year compared to 15% of Black business owners, 30% of white business owners, right? Compared to 15% Black business owners, right? Use credit cards, business credit cards in their first year. And of course, COVID-19 is compounding this, right? 42% of minority-owned small businesses, this is from McKinsey Small Business Survey, reported that obtaining credit has become increasingly difficult compared to 29% of all respondents. Again, survey of small business owners, 42% of minority-owned small businesses said that accessing credit and obtaining credit has become increasingly difficult for them compared to 29% of all respondents. So let's talk about, from an industry perspective, what steps are, do we see in the banking industry to address some of these disparities? And again, there are many reports out there, there are many, data points out there, but it all speaks to the same type of, again, gaps and disparities for minority-owned businesses, specifically African-American-owned businesses. So tell us about what you're seeing in the industry to address these disparities, and then does your institution have any specific initiatives or outreach programs that target minority-owned businesses, Black-owned businesses, or women-owned businesses as well?
So this is Brandon. I'll start it. I think the best way to kind of start this conversation is first by saying that while we're not alone in this, we have to be very clear. The banking industry as a whole has failed minority and women-owned businesses. The statistics speak for themselves. But the way I look at it is first you have to know or be made aware that there's a problem, and then you have to admit there's a problem, and finally you can address that problem. So what I'm really encouraged is that I think the momentum has been building to address this problem for a few years. And we all know that the events of 2020, I think, has put a huge spotlight on holding banks accountable to not just talk the talk, but also walk the walk. From an industry perspective, I've seen many banks take an active stance. I'm sure my fellow panelists, who I'm very privileged to share this virtual stage with, can speak to their own. But just looking at things I've seen, Chase Bank has made a huge multi-year commitment to addressing racial inequality in banking. I know Fidelity and PNC have some women-focused initiatives. Union Bank has a diversity program. And obviously Hancock Whitney, I think, and this is not a comparative statement, but we decided to take a holistic, all-inclusive approach. We felt like the way to tackle this problem was from many different angles. That's improvement in workforce diversity, that's outreach, partnership perspective, and then probably finally most important, an accountability perspective. From a workforce development diversity, if you will, we start forming relationships with local higher ed institutions, HBCUs, programs within larger institutions, to make sure that we let it be known that these opportunities are there in banking to try to get the best talent from a diversity standpoint. In terms of outreach, as you know, Classy, we teamed with Urban League of Louisiana Scale Up, which provides education and resources for women and minority-owned businesses in Baton Rouge. Late last year, we awarded 12 nonprofits currently supporting small businesses, do everything from free technical assistance to entrepreneur training. I don't want to, I can't name all of them, it takes too much time, but you know, Propeller, Thrive New Orleans, Flight are some of those. You know, from a home ownership perspective, we understand that access to capital, one of the ways that you can solve that is the equity that you can build up in your own home. And so we've taken a stance on that. And, you know, I think probably the biggest thing is the accountability perspective. It started with our board, our CEO, John Harrison, the COO, Shane Loper, and all the way to, we hired a SVP of Diversity Inclusion Director, Tamara Wire, who has a direct line to both the CEO and COO. And her whole purpose is to be solely focused on improving in this area. So whereas we certainly have some ground to cover, I'm really excited, I think, about the momentum that's taking place and the direction that we're headed.
Oh, wow.
This is Kathy. This is Kathy. I'll jump in. So Hope's products and services, you know, across the board are designed to advance economic opportunity by closing financial service gaps and facilitating investments in our underserved communities. And when I talk about those investments can come from banks in many situations. So by Hope being a CDFI, we are not in direct competition with those big banks. So we partner with those banks a lot to make the investments that we make. And 61% of Hope's commercial loans are made to minority and women-owned businesses. So Hope is considered a minority bank because of, you know, because of our portfolio and because of our membership. But we have a diverse staff and we service all. But being a community development financial institution, we are intermediary for varied loan sources, and one of them being a credit enhancement fund. And I like to mention that because that is funded by a bank to Hope. And what that does is that does help with access to capital, right? So we are a collateralized lender, but there's many ways that we can work that, and collateral could be many things, right? But if you're short in that area, that's where our credit enhancement product comes in. And I just wanted to highlight that. That is just one of the ways that we look at when I talked about earlier that we understand what the challenges are out there, and then we look at catering our products and when we approach investors with what those challenges are and how do we need to present our products and services to meet those challenges. So, you know, Hope was founded to bridge the capital gap for minority and women-owned businesses throughout. Initially, it started throughout the Mississippi Delta. We have expanded that market since then, but you know, we are intentional with our practices to make sure that we are meeting those needs, and we are intentional with our outreach as well. Thank you.
This is Tish. I'll add to what Brandon and Kathy have shared. Much as Brandon mentioned, we here at Gulf Coast Bank also take a holistic approach when it comes to just our culture, everything that we're doing from the top down. We're being very intentional to make sure that we are addressing any needs that, you know, these gaps that we're talking about here. I mentioned SBA, the targeted outreach that provides. We have an entire division that is focused on SBA loans. And so when you think about small businesses, often they may start with friends and family, helping them to access a little bit of capital, but you've got to have, to get that traditional bank loan, you've got to have collateral and capital. And so SBA programs, and I know others on the panel offer them as well, they provide something in the middle, available on a non-discriminatory basis. They're backed by the federal government. And so we as an SBA lender work really hard in specializing in this area because we do want to be able to take care of those who may not meet normal underwriting programs. And SBA loans are really a perfect avenue for disadvantaged individuals who lack collateral. So I just wanted to add that.
Classy, I'll talk about Regions' approach real quick. We have established a lot of partnerships and provide financial support to the community organizations that assist the minority and women-owned businesses. As you know, we've made a 3-year financial commitment to assist the National Urban League on those efforts, and that's going to include some participating affiliates like the Houston Area Urban League, Indianapolis, Jacksonville, Knoxville, Greater Atlanta, Greater Chattanooga, and of course the Urban League of Louisiana. So throughout our footprint, we try to do that. Also, we have a good partnership and are the sole sponsor of True Funds Alabama and Louisiana Women in Business, which is an empowerment program serving the women business owners in those states. And that's targeted through the focus of building the capacity of women-owned businesses. Another one that we partner with, we support the Louisiana Small Business Development Centers, of course, through our SBA efforts, and those help all businesses with some low cost or no cost guidance and training for those business owners and potential owners. We also support the National Orleans Business Alliance and through their efforts, Idea Village of New Orleans, Thrive New Orleans, and New Orleans Regional Black Chamber of Commerce, and also the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. So we've kind of recognized those issues and trying to put ourselves out there in the different communities and different organizations to help with that effort.
That's awesome. Thank you so much to all of you. What I like to do is to make sure that we all are learning. What I'm hearing is that first, many institutions within the industry, such as Hancock, Whitney, and also Gulf Coast. See, we're talking about a holistic approach, right? So that's top down, but that's also I like to say, inside out, right? So, looking at the understanding of, the banking institution, right? It's one thing to have banking practices when it comes to client engagement, but the other piece is what are you doing internally to facilitate and to create a culture of diversity, right? And so, you can't, it's almost like, can you really do one without the other, right? Let's think about that. And it cascades out to other types of programs, right? Like, so diversity and inclusion when it comes to from a people perspective, but also supplier diversity, right? So it keeps going in terms of the connection to make sure that diversity and inclusion is a part of your framework and your fabric, right? So I love those comments. He also talked about accountability. And then, with hope, we see, in my mind, the CDFI was created to address the gaps, right? That's the position of it. That's why the institution of a CDFI was put in place to address these disparities, to address these gaps. And so, from a kind of inherently, that is what the goal of the CDFI is. And they do that in partnership, right, with a number of the other larger institutions, banking institutions for funding. So it's just wonderful to be able to see it and put it in perspective in that way. And then, of course, the SBA support. Of course, we have a Women's Business Resource Center here at the Urban League of Louisiana, who we are funded, through a cooperative agreement with the SBA. And it was wonderful that we can understand the connection between the support of the entity, the government entity, and then the lending institutions and the bankers, because it's such a critical thing to be able to, and the SBA does a great job at that, at making sure that small businesses get connected to those resources and get connected to those institutions that can support them on the ground. And then, Amy talked about kind of direct programs, right? Direct sponsorships, direct support for programs that support the small business community, and then targeted groups, targeted underrepresented groups, right? And so that is kind of, the model or the approach that the banking industry is taking. And I have to say, since these, again, what I've seen with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic is a lot of banks have stepped up to the plate because of those not only historical disparities, but what we've seen as a result of the pandemic. It's just amazing to me. And so I want to say, again, just in my own experience, I've seen a number of banking institutions step up to the plate and invest dollars, actual dollars, into the hands of businesses, not just through loans, but also through grants. And so that's something that we have coming up with regions as well, in partnership, again, through the National Urban League. And so we're going to be doing some grants as well. So it's amazing. Again, like you said, it's like talking the talk, but you also got to walk the walk. You have to make it a priority, right? And so I appreciate you guys for those remarks. And so I think that's setting the stage, and we can do that in a positive way, that we're making some movement, right? We're making some progress. So in your experience, what have you seen? What are some of the challenges that our minority-owned businesses are facing when it comes to being able to access capital? And again, you can speak, what you're seeing, one-on-one, or what you're seeing in general across the industry in terms of the specific challenges that our minority-owned businesses are facing. If anyone wants to address that.
So this is Kathy. I'll start. So I think the first thing, just starting really, really elementary here, is just being prepared. And that is okay if you're not. Sometimes you just don't know. But that is something that I think small businesses should think about, just having some plan. And, I know some people think that, a business plan is not, it's not cool anymore. But however fancy or not so fancy that you want to construct that, everybody needs a plan. So having just even a sense of organization when you approach an investor or approach a bank, just what are your plans? Because of course, you can only access capital if there is some impression that there is an opportunity for the business to grow, there is an opportunity for the business to be sustainable. So it's just starting really with the basics of having your financials together, or having your tax returns together. And if you're a startup business, then it's going to be your personal taxes that you need to have in place, or some financials. And because that's important in moving forward and protecting the assets of your business as well. If you're going to have payroll, all of that. So a banker is going to want to understand what your projections are. So it's really starting with those basic things. And again, if you don't have that and you approach, someone like Hope, we are not going to just turn you away. We're going to help you to take those steps, which is why we partner with, some of the organizations that were mentioned in the Urban League, especially. So we're going to make sure that you get that technical assistance. But, I just think some of those steps are really, they're not thought of sometimes. And you shouldn't be intimidated with whatever that is. So having a relationship with a banker to even help you with those preliminary steps are really important.
This is Brandon. I'll jump in. I certainly want to piggyback off of Kathy. From my experience, it seems like there's really kind of three different, if you will, streams in which are the biggest hurdles, if you will. And I think that the first one that she kind of touched on was, like they said, kind of a certain lack of knowledge on what's necessary to prepare to be a business owner. And that, I think comes from maybe the lack of that kind of information being able to be passed on generationally. And so you don't know what you don't know, right? And there's two other pillars, I think, as well. One of them is, as we're kind of here to talk about, which is lack of access to capital. And this isn't just through banks. This is through alternative lenders. This is through investors, and frankly, through the lack of generational wealth. A lot of minorities can't call on the bank of mom or dad to kind of help them get off the ground. And then finally, I think it's kind of a lack of connections and introductions, right? Someone who when you lack someone being able to tell you, hey, go visit this person at this bank, or did you know about this particular program that can help you out? And so when you combine all of those three, I think it just leads to a great amount of challenges that makes it just that much more difficult for small minority and women-owned businesses.
I want to add to that, Brandon, just talking about systemic racism, and I don't want to derail us or anything, but the reality is, if you look at banking as an industry, the history of banking, it was primarily white male, right? And so the holistic approaches that Brandon and I were talking about, starting from the inside out, looking at everything that we do and making sure that we are diverse and have initiatives across the board, are going to help certainly overcome some of those challenges.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And, so I want to go back, we talked about preparation, talked about financials and tax returns, making sure that we are, have those, not just, I think that part of it is, and I think one of you said, and maybe it was Brandon, talked about, what does it take to start a business, right? And the interesting thing is that we've seen some long-term, what I would call a mature business, right, in terms of age, that are not necessarily prepared, right? Because again, not having that information, not having the understanding of what it's going to take. And sometimes it's the intimidation of the financial piece of the business, the intimidation of the, going to a lender, facing, coming to terms with, everything that's asked of us when we go to get funding, but also just the assumptions that are made. There's so many myths out there or assumptions that are made, again, without information. And to talk about those connections, you guys talked about connections to, whether it's someone saying, hey, talk to this person, talk to this banker. I feel like we have expanded that in terms of access to connections, access to resources. There are so, and I will say it starts with the SBA, because sometimes that's with the first person. If I don't know anything about running a business, most people start with the SBA, right? And then it kind of trickles down to the technical assistance resource partners that are, supported by the SBA. And then it goes from there. But one of the, the important things is to kind of uncover this, how do we get folks connected, more connected to the ecosystem to try to resolve some of these issues? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, what I've seen and what I know in my experience is that there is no shortage of resources for small businesses. There's no shortage. We actually, in this region, it is extremely saturated, right? There are a number of resources that businesses can connect to. And so the question is, and I always make this kind of it's almost like a joke, because when we started one of our first sessions when the pandemic started, we couldn't allow any additional registrations. We had 1,000 people to register for that first EIDL PPP session, one webinar. And I'm thinking to myself, where have you all been, right? Where have all these businesses been? It's like this emergency kind of, opened up the floodgates, and you saw all of these folks that have been in business for years. Some startups, but most have been in business for years that had never accessed a connection to one of the technical assistants or resource partners, right? And so, it's almost like I've been in business for 20 years, but I need to start from scratch in terms of my financial health. Wow, right? And so those are the types of things that we need to get through. So again, talking about financial literacy, we're talking about financial relationships, right? Having a relationship with your banker, having a relationship with a banker, right? Understanding how money works, understanding how loans work, just the basics. And so again, wanted to highlight those points that you guys made. So thank you very much for those remarks. Again, I like to make sure that we are we're learning as we go. So let's talk about some specific strategies, tactics, things that our minority-owned businesses can do to overcome these challenges. And you guys again work with businesses. You understand what the industry is looking for. Tell me and tell our businesses what they need to be doing in order to address some of their I guess I would say lack of information or lack of relationships. What do they need to be doing right now to get themselves positioned to take advantage of funding opportunities?
This is Tish. I'll start and kind of piggyback off some of what Kathy mentioned and what you mentioned. That relationship for us as a community bank, and I know for others on the panel as well, that is really important. Starting with the bank where you want to eventually apply for funding. Start that relationship now. Don't be intimidated. I think Brandon mentioned earlier, just if you look back, the history of things that you may not have those connections, but don't be people at the bank. They're people, we're all people, right? Just like you and me. If you look at all of our banks, there's some diversity in them that you see, and so we just encourage you not to be intimidated and have patience. Know that it's not going to happen overnight. They say it takes money to make money, and that is true. We call it sweat equity. If you take time to save and get prepared ahead of time, then it shows us that you're serious, that you have some, you've already invested your time into trying to prepare to launch. And I know we're talking about all businesses across the board, but talking specifically about startup businesses, I think it's important to mention that. But I just wanted to, again, point out the relationship, and I can get into specifics as far as credit and things like that go. I don't know if we're going to get into that a little bit later, but that relationship and taking the time and being patient to save, writing your story now. Know that the bank is going to be looking at your credit, looking at everything, and think about it from the bank's perspective. What can I do to prepare to make the bank know that I'm going to pay the loan back? Right? Because at the end of the day, that's our business model. We don't want anyone to fail. We want to be here to help businesses succeed. And so you've got to prepare ahead of time and be patient by saving and working on your credit.
I would add to
and
that.
I'll piggyback on Tish. Starting that relationship, even if that's just starting with a savings account or a business account, and getting familiar and comfortable. So I think that's a good first step, just getting familiar with that person. Or, generally, I know I still use banks when it's safe to go in, and, you're going to get friendly with one banker and you're going to get to know another banker. And then they can help to direct you. So I think the education piece on and creating that culture and environment on the financial institution side, and on the small business side is really important, because we keep training to make sure that, our people are responsive and they're patient. And then they will direct you too, like your banker will direct you. And I always say that, relationship with your banker, get to know a legal person, get to know a bookkeeper or a CPA, and those need to be your go-to people, your people that you call on, for many different things. So, that relationship with your banker also will connect you to other resources, because, banks are going to know what's going on with the Urban League, and what's going on with Thrive NOLA, and what grants may be out there, what special loans may be out there. And so, getting comfortable with those, getting educated from your banker is something that can happen as well. And I had another thought, but I forgot. So thank you.
I know I heard Amy. Amy, you had a contribution to this?
Yes, I was going to actually mention a couple of things that Kathy did about not only your banking relationship and building that, but to reiterate what she said about the CPA, an attorney, bookkeeper, whoever you're going to use. I mean, those are your trusted advisors outside of your banker. And so starting to build those relationships early and getting advice from them early on certainly helps. But on top of that, actually doing the research and the planning yourself, and making sure that you understand the industry that you're wanting to get into, and what are going to be the challenges, what do you need to know about that industry, the financials, every aspect of the business, because owning a business is hard work. It never stops. And I think that's where we see customers have the most challenges, is they don't have a true understanding sometimes of the business and all the financial pieces. And I think if they start with that early on before they even go down that path, it'll certainly help them.
That's right. That's right.
No, I think everyone said everything that I would have said. Like I said, develop a good team. I tell people all the time, obviously you want to have a good bookkeeper, accountant, things of that nature, but also say that, the value of your banker is, your accountant, your attorney, they may charge by the hour. Visiting with your banker basically just costs you your time. right? And so utilize us. And the other thing is, I think we need to be very specific when we talk about building a relationship with a bank. And I think Kathy alluded to it. It's not just depositing $100 into an account and just leaving that $100 there and saying, oh, I've banked with you for X amount of years. Utilize that as a gateway to get to know the people within the bank, people who can vouch for you, people who can advise you on how that bank operates. Different banks have different appetites for different type of businesses and things of that nature and loans, and who better than the people within the bank that then provide you that guidance. And then finally, like I said, I think preparation. You can't decide to begin a business you can't have the idea on Friday and expect to have a business on Monday, right? It takes a lot longer, a lot more planning to get to that stage. And just to kind of be clear about the role that banks play, and I tell people this is kind of a math problem really quickly. If we give someone a $100,000 loan at 5%, even if they turn that $100,000 into $1 million, that bank is entitled to $5,000, right? But if for some reason they make a bad loan and they lose that 100,000, the bank has to make 20 other $100,000 loans at $5,000 just to break even. So our model is not made to be able to take upon the type of risk that would be associated with being able to benefit from the upside and the equity. So, understanding that component, you do have to make sure that you have your ducks in a row when you do approach a bank.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. We talked about the relationships. And so, it's just one of the things that we, a lot of the technical assistance partners we teach, you got to establish a relationship with the bank. And then, trying to provide some guidance on what that looks like, right? How do you assess where you want to bank, and so it's just, again, it's important for business owners to know that, and really kind of how it works, right? You got to have a relationship with the banker because those are the folks that are going to have to speak on your behalf, right? So they're gonna take that package and go to their team, and they have to be able to vouch for you. And so if I'm gonna put my name on this, it better be, you know what I mean? So it's you got to understand how this works, and that's why relationships are so important. We got to understand. And then Tish said something about and Amy, I think we talked about research and planning and looking at the industry and the market. Listen, it is very important, and that's why, and we'll talk about business plans. I think Kathy mentioned it earlier. You need to have a documented plan because the bank and an organization that's going to invest in your business needs to understand what your plan is, and you need to be able to effectively articulate that. And you also need to show that you've done the research to understand what is going on in the market, what is going on in the industry. Very simple example, I'm going to start a restaurant, or I'm just using this as an example. Well, hey, the data shows that, may show that restaurant, and this is just a hypothetical example, I'm not using any specific data points, but we're showing that restaurants have are going to, the forecast shows that restaurants are going to decline in the next 2 years, let's say. Well, again, let's talk through and understand why that's happening. You got to understand what's going on. How are you going to address the issues that are happening in the industry? How are you going to combat them, right? Like what, and so if I'm a banker and I'm looking at, the trend is that, this market or this industry is on the decline, but you want to start a business in it, you have to have some type of compelling argument for me to say, I want to invest in that particular type of business, right? And so that's just a very broad example, but you get what I'm saying. It's really about understanding what's going on in your market, what's going on in your industry. Again, because you are going to have to, it's like you're trying to sell, right? You're trying to tell these folks that, hey, my business is going to do well, and I'm going to be able to pay you back, right? You have to convince me of that. And so again, you're going to have to bring some more information, more data to the table. Timing. We see this a lot across across small businesses. I say that we live in a world of immediate gratification. Everybody wants to start a business yesterday. And so there is little preparation, right? And so we have to get into the mode of making sure that we plan ahead, and that we do the work, right? Do the work to get ourselves positioned to start a successful and to grow a successful business. And so, in putting in some sweat equity, right? Tish mentioned that, putting in some sweat equity. So I love those remarks. Thanks, guys. So I do want to spend a couple of minutes on talking about specifically what are some things that our businesses can do to get credit ready, right? So let's talk about like the credit piece. So we know we lack credit preparedness oftentimes. And so what are some of the things that you're seeing, specifically when it comes to some of our minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, small businesses? What are you seeing in terms of the credit preparedness piece? And what recommendations do you have so that our businesses can increase their credit score and, of course, their bankability?
So Classy, I'll start this one off. From talking to our lenders, when it comes to credit cards, I mean, that's the biggest. There are a lot of people who pay everything on time, but they have their credit cards maxed out. And so getting that under control, lowering that 50% usage at the max, but really we want much less than that, right? And recommend paying it off every single month. Obviously, improving your credit score is gonna improve your bankability. And some advice just specifically when it comes to the credit score, it's simple. Don't pay anything late. Pay your utilities, your rent, everything on time. Those are all common sense things that we know. But I think it's also important to point out to take the time annually to check your credit score. That you can do that for free once a year, annualcreditreport.com, I think it is, where you can go and check that and make sure you're not getting dinged for something that isn't yours. Or maybe, after high school, you rented an apartment and didn't pay one of your utility bills. It came after you moved out. They didn't have a forwarding address, so they put out a collection on that. Things like that, you don't want the bank to be the first person to find that out, right? You want to know that ahead of time, so you need to be prepared for that, or so that you can handle it, take care of it.
So that's some good information. I don't think everyone realizes that your credit report is yours. So, and there are absolutely free credit reports that you can get every year. So just make sure that you do that. But if you do find yourself in a situation where there are credit challenges, some of the things that you could do, again, having a relationship with your banker. There are products out there, Hope offers them, where they can help you to repair that credit. There are products where you can put up a small amount of money and you can borrow against that money. I know that may be tough sometimes, but these are some steps that you can take to build that credit when sometimes your credit is just shot. And, we do find that, and things happen sometimes, in the economy, if you're in business, and sometimes you just can't pay, so it affects your credit. So there are some credit products that you can take advantage of, which could be, a secure loan, a secure credit card, or just having that credit report and getting someone to work with you to, if that's reaching out to creditors and others that you have borrowed from to see what you can do to prepare those and to pay those off. So that is something that, you may have to start to do before you get to that point. And then again, understanding what is available. There are, as I indicated, credit enhancement products out there, that can assist depending on your credit score. We look at lower credit scores than most financial institutions. And one thing that I did want to mention, because the question always comes up, are you going to look at my business credit, or are you going to look at my personal credit? And we generally have guarantees on our loan, and we're looking more at the personal credit.
Yep. Awesome. Anyone want to add to that?
So I could just add very briefly, going back to what I said about a bank and the very model that we operate under forces us to take a lot less risk than if we were able to benefit from the upside. And what I tell people is that if we look at your personal credit and it shows that you haven't paid other creditors, then Classy, to your point, how can I be an advocate going back to the bank saying that, oh well, he'll pay us though, or she'll pay us though, right? Because they really like us. It just doesn't work that way. Your history, your reputation, like anything outside of banking, it follows you. And so I would suggest work on paying those things off. Yeah, I mean, there's just no way around that. Credit is very important, and it follows you around.
That's right. That's right. I want to talk about one more thing, and then looks like we have a lot of questions, so I want to make sure that we have time for our questions. But let's talk very briefly, and I'm talking about, I love this topic because it's one of the things that we teach, right? We talk about and we teach when we are supporting small businesses in financial, in getting their financials in order. We work with them on forecasting, right? For the operational, understanding the feasibility of their business model and looking at financial, financial feasibility of what they, of their operations. And so, of course, it's something that the lender will look at, looking at the forecast of the business. What are you projecting? Can you guys tell us, if you are, if you all require forecasts, and then what is the importance of them in assessing the ability of and cash flow projections, of course, that's what we're looking at, to assess the bankability and the feasibility of the business concept, the business model. Can you talk about a little bit about forecasting?
I can speak to it from the states, from regions. It's really going to depend on what type of loan that they're looking at. If they're looking at a loan on the conventional side, we'll ask for it, but conventionally, we're going to make approvals really based on historical numbers, more so. On the SBA side, projections, I would say, are a little more important because, especially depending on what type of loan request it is, if it's an acquisition loan or a new loan, then, or a new business, then obviously they're going to be really important because we need to see where that new owner is going to take that business. So again, they'll look at the historical numbers as well to see how the business has been able to support itself or the new note in the past. But then also need to look at the projections to see, does this new business owner know where it needs to go? Again, back to the research piece that we talked about before, what are the challenges in the industry? How are they going to combat that? And how does that flow back to the projections? And we try to look for not just like a 6 month or 12 month, but you're looking out 3 years, 5 years. And then some more specific products, if it has to do with contracts, we need to know the projections for that. We're also going to look at, if it's an existing business, we're going to want to see their projections and maybe what they have in the pipe for their receivables or their pending contracts, their work in progress. So all that kind of plays a role in those projections moving forward for that business.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I would agree with what Amy said. It's critical for business success, right? Think about New Orleans. We rely on tourism here, a lot of restaurants. Restaurant sales are usually seasonal, but many expenses like rent aren't. So you've got a forecast to make sure the cash flow in and out. You've got, when there aren't as many people in the restaurant, you're able to still pay your rent and things like that. Amy's mentioned a few times too, experience. Forecasting is critical for funding because bottom line, we want to make sure that you can repay your debt. And as you're forecasting, it's got to make sense. It's got to match the standard for the industry. We happen to have funded a lot of restaurants through our SBA program, and we know that there are low margins, there's a high failure rate. So if you forecast higher margins than restaurants are going to make, when you look at the data, that's a problem. There's quantifiable data out there that supports forecasting. So, nobody has a crystal ball. We can't determine what's going to happen in the future. Just like this pandemic, we had no idea it was coming, but we can make predictions based on the data that's there of what's likely to happen.
That's right.
And this is Brandon. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kathy. You're on
Kathy, I
mute.
think you're muted.
Okay, I'm sorry. I would just like to echo what has been said, that forecasting is pivotal, and it allows you to set goals and set your inventory levels and prepare for cycles in the business and to understand the industry. So we definitely do require that for most of our loans. And, it's really a good exercise for you, as everyone indicated, to just to help you with preparing for what could happen. And at the end of the day, when you're talking about, being able to meet the demands of your vendors or your customers, it's really just going to help, it's really just going to help you to set those service levels and to be prepared. And, and then again, that is, we haven't even gotten into talking about cash flow, that can impact your cash flow. And, 82% of businesses fail due to poor cash flow.
That's right. That's right. I'm sorry, I thought, does someone else want to chime in? And then we'll go.
No, I think everyone said exactly what I was going to say. U.S. Bank did that study that said 82% does, and so to just kind of echo Tish, no one has a crystal ball, but what we do know is that the lack of cash flow projecting can almost assure you of failure. And so, regardless of whether or not you come to a bank, even if you're just sitting on a pile of cash, you have to know the biggest question, which is, when do you get paid? And when do you have to pay? Simply put.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't, reiterate or stress enough the importance of understanding your cash flow, understand projecting, even just, this is a basic exercise of understanding what's coming in and what's going out, right? In the timing of that, and understanding that, again, not just for banking, but for operational effectiveness, right? Operational effectiveness, you need to know that. And it also supports, it also, what's the word? It's like the base of your business model. Let's say, I need to understand what my cash flow is going to look like, because I may need to change something in my operations. I may need to increase, sales on one of my product lines to be able to meet the expenses that I have on again, we're talking about operational effectiveness, not just bankability. And so again, forecasting is important, just as strategic planning is important. And that's why we always encourage our business owners to understand the difference between a business owner and an entrepreneur, and getting in the entrepreneurial mindset, right? Becoming the entrepreneurial thinker, because you are the person that is leading the organization and needs to understand your numbers and your metrics, and putting on that hat is something that a lot of our small businesses take some time to transition to, right? We are used to being the person that owns the construction company, but we're still out in the field doing the work. We own the restaurant, but we're still in the kitchen cooking. We're in the mode where we still work in the business versus on it, right? And so we make sure that our businesses understand that. In the same vein, and when we talk about forecasting, we also want to talk about, business planning. Kathy, you mentioned it earlier. A lot of businesses, and we see this with the folks that we work with one-on-one in counseling. It is, oftentimes we, get pushed back, or, we sometimes lose clients because they do not want to work on a business plan, a documented business plan, right? I got to back up and say, hey, you still need this document. You may think that this is obsolete. You may think that you don't need it. You think you have it all in your head. But can you guys share with us the importance of having a business plan, just in general, but also just, when you come to a bank, for a banker to understand what's going on in your business? Can you guys share with us a little bit about that, and maybe what you're seeing? Have you seen business plans, effective business plans, come to you guys?
I'll jump in regards to SBA specifically. Business plans are required if they're going to look at an SBA loan. So, and small business development centers do a very, very good job helping with developing those with business owners. So a lot of times that's the resource that we push them to if they need help to go through and create that business plan. But remember, Ben Franklin has a quote, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So I think always keep that in mind. So with anything, you have to have a plan, and it's going to be no different with the business. And some specific things that they need to make sure that they're including in that is not only, the financial aspects of the business, the projections, everybody of course knows, I think typically don't include that, but the demographics of the area, the market, this is their opportunity to add the color to their application and really paint the picture of what that business is going to look like, what the strengths are, what their strengths are, why the bank should approve a loan, and really basically state their case. And so I think the strong business plan is their ability to really help us to understand that and see that. Somebody mentioned earlier about, the banker, a lot of the times our loan officer is the one that's going to take the package. I think, Classy, you mentioned this, take the package forward to either a committee, loan committee, or whoever it is, that the underwriters, whoever's going to approve this. And so it's our job to add that color as well, but we have to understand it and we have to know it. And the only way we can do that is from the customer, from the business owner. And so I think a strong business plan really helps us to outline those things too when we're trying to get something approved for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that is so true. But what I think what I think you should think about is a business plan is for you. So your business plan is for you, so that when you're having conversations with someone that wants to invest in your business, it helps you to come across more intelligent about your business. It helps you to come across more confidently, because the components of the business plan is going to be understanding the industry, and as we talked about, giving us some forecasting numbers and a market analysis and demographics as was stated, and thinking about your marketing strategy. So this is going to help you to stretch and to be creative and to think about all aspects of your business and to put it on paper, of course, realistically. And so more than the banks needing it, it's really something that you need, and it's really going to assist you.
That's right.
I'll agree with Kathy that it's definitely going to assist you. Here at Gulf Coast Bank and Trust, we do, it depends on the type of loan, but we do require them and look at them. Amy mentioned for SBA, obviously we're a large SBA lender, so we require them there. We want to know, but even for some of our traditional commercial loans, we want to know who your key employees are, if you have any partners, projections, and are they based on facts? Are they based in reality? Because we've got to know if it's sustainable, right? And I think it's been mentioned a few times about expertise. I mean, if you're opening a restaurant and you've never worked in management of a restaurant, maybe you have a partner or somebody who's going in with you and has some experience. So we don't require any specific format, but everything you put in there is going to be so important to sell. This is why you need to make this loan to me, right? I'm going to be able to pay it back because of all of these things that are laid out in the plan, in addition to the financials and everything, of course. So I think it's really important, and we here at Gulf Coast Bank and Trust certainly look at it. Like I said, depending on the product. So I'll throw out, if you're purchasing a shotgun and looking to rent it out and have some money to put down, we're not going to look at a business plan, right?
Yeah.
But oftentimes we do.
Absolutely. What I want to do now is I want to go to the questions. We have a few questions from our audience. Erica, can you start us off with some of the questions that you have in the questions box?
Absolutely. Yes, I'd like to start with Stephen's question. Stephen has two questions. His first is, he says, with the challenges that most minority entrepreneurs face in accessing capital, whether that be equity or debt capital, he has two questions. The first one is, how do minority entrepreneurs access startup and our growth capital from private equity providers, such as the New Orleans Startup Fund and other local capital providers?
So let me say this, we are going to talk about that on February 5th. So please log into that session on understanding series funding. So we have a wonderful lineup of equity investment firms and those that support small businesses that are looking for equity funding. So again, please join in on the session on February 5th at 10 a.m. And we'll talk about that. So we'll have on that session, I want to say New Orleans Angel Network will be on that one. New Orleans Startup Fund will be on there. Camelback Ventures will be on there. And so you'll have an opportunity to talk about those equity funders for startup.
And I do want to let you guys know that if you look in the chat, there are links to register for not only the second session, but also the third session that Classy's referencing. So you can just tap those links, sign up, or forward them to others who want to sign up, and feel free to do that. Okay, so Stephen's second question.
And I want to say this, we got you covered, right? We wanted to make sure that we talked about both debt and equity investment. Again, this is about capital growth. This is about understanding the many types of, many ways that our small businesses, our minority-owned businesses can access the resources, the funding that we need to grow. And so we've got you covered.
Okay, and the second question Stephen has, I feel like you guys have addressed it, but I'll just ask it on his behalf. He says, most minority entrepreneurs don't come from families with generational wealth, either through long-term home owners or family business ownership. Why is it that financial institutions deny minority entrepreneurs more often than other ethnic groups?
So this is Kathy. So Stephen, I think, you know, that is realized in the market. So there are, you know, institutions like CDFIs that absolutely realize that, and their whole mission is to address that. And so, you know, I think if you, you know, form a relationship with the CDFI, again, or a banker, you will get the opportunity to see that there is more intentionality about products and services. And I think with this new administration coming in, we're going to see more attention and funding and programs. So I think there is a good effort put forth to address those issues that have been real.
That's right.
And I'll just end it exactly where I started it, which is you know, no one's denying that there is not a problem that needs to be addressed. You know, if you think about community banks when they initially started, a lot of them started very small, and you almost lend to just people you know. And so if everyone within the building looked the same, you know, there was a good chance that the people that they you know, put their confidence in and risk in kind of look the same. And so as I said before, you know, first you have to be made aware or know that there's a problem, then you have to admit it, and then I think you can address it. I think the first two have certainly been tackled, and now we are in the process of addressing that.
That's right. Thank you.
I would agree with Brandon, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
In other words, approach the bank so that we know you're there and you're looking for that relationship, and we are going to do everything in our power to make it happen.
Absolutely. Erica, got another question?
Yes. Kevin asks, he says, good morning. I'm a newly formed small business that currently does not need a loan. However, I would like to form a relationship with my banking institution so that when the need arises, I'm not scrambling to apply for loans.
The research that someone like the gentleman needs to do is to find out the appetite of those particular banks. Because I want to be very clear with you. You can establish the relationship with the wrong bank for what you're trying to do. There's some banks that don't like brick and mortar. There's some banks that love brick and mortar. And so, you know, don't just assume that because you have, you know, some deposits with a particular bank, that that's the right bank for you. Do your research, network, ask that bank, ask other banks. This is what I do. Do you all operate in that space? And I can't stress that enough. All banks do not operate alike, and all banks do not have the same appetite for the same type of loans.
That's right.
So I'll agree with Brandon, but I also want to say, as a community bank, if we have a relationship, we're going to be much more likely, regardless of what it is you're looking for, to have an appetite. It may not be our primary, But if you have that long-standing relationship, we're going to be much more likely to work things out. I mean, if you think about it, when the pandemic hit and we had all the paycheck protection loans that we did, all the PPP loans, we did over 2,500 for everything across the board, right? So whether they were a customer of ours or not, because we care about small businesses in our community and we want to make them work. And if you have a really strong business plan and you've worked hard on it, regardless of what the business is, certainly Gulf Coast Bank and Trust wants to take a look at it, especially if you have that relationship. So while Brandon's right, there is always an appetite. You're going to find some banks, particularly community banks, who will stretch some if they have that relationship.
Gotcha. Erica, have another question?
Yes, Brittany asks, how does a startup access lending opportunities with no revenue to start their business credit? Will the business credit be pulled instead?
So this is Kathy. I'll answer that. So personal business credit would be pulled. We would also look at if you get into an industry, it could be a startup business, but maybe you have some experience in that industry, that would be considered. But there would be many things that would be considered because it is a startup business. So again, as I mentioned at Hope, we are a collateralized lender. Depending on that business, are you going to have some equipment? So it is possible, but there's many different factors that would be considered. Your personal credit would be considered, and your past experience in that industry would be considered as well.
Gotcha. Thank you. Next question.
Okay, this is more of a comment from Brent. He says, hi, I also work in the SBA lending arena for a CDFI. It's crucial, even for very small businesses, to establish relationships with an attorney and a good accountant. By good accountant, I mean a CPA, not a bookkeeping service or a tax preparer. Poor quality financial statements are a huge setback for us in the SBA loan process. I don't know if you guys want to if you wanted to comment on that, but I can go to the next question, but I wanted to make sure.
So we agree. We do see, of course, that a lot, from a loan packaging perspective, when we go to support a small business to just even get started. And so that's why the technical assistance partners work specifically on financial statements development, financial statements analysis, and maintenance. And so, we are working on it, have been for many, many years, but it's just a matter of continuing the course of making sure that our small businesses take ownership of that financial health piece of their business and making sure that they keep their financials accurate and their reports up to date. So thank you very much for your comment.
And he does follow up with one more comment. He says, few lenders provide lending to true startup businesses. While the SBA allows it, you're going to struggle to find an institution.
Yeah. Go ahead to the next question. I want to make sure that we cover as many as we can moving forward.
Okay. So Brittany says, is there a minimum amount that banks are willing to lend a small startup business? Are business loans or lines of credit normally a larger amount, like $10,000 or more?
It depends on the banking institution. It depends on the financial institution and the type of financial institution. So what you may want to do is first connect with a technical assistance partner. You can connect with us at the Urban League and we can connect you. We can assess what you have going on to understand what type of financial institution is appropriate for you, whether that is a traditional bank, depository institution, whether it's a non-depository institution, whether it's a CDFI, whether it's a micro lender, and it seems that you are looking for an opportunity to build your credit through an organization like a micro lender, and we can assist you with getting connected and by, again, first understanding more about your business and then connecting you to a resource for that. Erica?
Okay, the next question is by Bridget. She says, do both partners of a business have to be parties on any business loan or grant?
I'll take that one. I think it's going to depend sometimes on the requirements of the lending institution as well. I can speak for regions and SBA in general. We require any owner 20% or more. Anyone who has 20% or more ownership in that business, they do have to be on any applications and typically be a personal guarantee as well, or provide a personal guarantee as well. As far as grants, each grant would be different. So it would just depend on which one they were applying for, and they would have to look at the details and requirements for that.
Okay. And Liz has a question. She asks, ultimately, who makes the final decision? It seems that it is important to bank locally since they understand the community, i.e. Mardi Gras businesses. They may not be as understood in a place like Tennessee.
So we'll go back to having a relationship with your banker. Not all credit analysts and where the final credit decisions are made are local, even with banks that you think are local sometimes. But that's why your commercial lender or your banker, whatever the title is with that institution, is your voice. They are the one that tells the story. And generally, they get the opportunity to present your application in some form and to speak on behalf of you and to answer questions that the analyst may have. So that relationship is important, but, you know, it doesn't necessarily, all credit decisions are not made locally. And your banker is going to understand that industry and understand the customs and the cultures, and again, be able to speak on your behalf.
Yeah, thanks so much. So what I want to do is, I know we had some additional questions and we'll answer those offline, but we are out of time and I want to be mindful of everyone's time. And so I just want to give, each of our panelists just maybe 10 seconds to give one nugget of wisdom as we close out the session, and then I'll bring back Jasmine for some closing remarks. We'll start with you, Brandon, just one nugget takeaway for our audience.
One nugget, well, I can't limit to one. I'd have to say two. I want to piggyback off something you said. I think the most simple way of putting it is there's a difference between being able to make really good pies and owning a bakery. And so you really have to understand your business. The other thing I would say is that your personal and the business, especially for startups and small businesses, are intertwined. And so you have to be mindful of that in terms of personal debt. We have a young lender here named Dennis Jack who said something. There's different variations of it, but it's, tell me what you want, then tell me what you're willing to sacrifice. And so, do you need that second car note? Do you need to go on that vacation that you can't pay for and have to put on a credit card? All of these things go into it. And so plan ahead. But finally, I'll just say this, all of you all who are entrepreneurs, like, be proud of yourselves. I mean, very few people enter into this space. And so, you've already kind of been a success just by putting yourself on the line like that. And so, take that confidence and persevere. And just understand that there's not just one bank, there's not just one investor. I always say there's no such thing as no, there's just not now with that one particular person and or shop. So take that with you. I wish you all well. But like I said, keep striving.
Thank you. Tish?
So I would say it's never too early to start planning. You have one chance to make that first impression. So start preparing for that first impression now with everything that's been shared today and the other research that you've done, and save as fast as you can, as much as you can. And while you're saving, you can assemble a team that you trust, because you're going to need a team, not just the experts that we talked today and the resources, but family and friends are often helpful. Maybe they don't have the capital, but they can help in other ways. And so I encourage you in doing that now.
Amy, thank you so much, Tish. Amy?
So mine might be kind of the elephant in the room, but I think it's something that needs to be addressed and put out there. And I think it's come to light even more through the pandemic and business owners applying for PPP funds and other assistance grants. I know working and owning your own business is hard. As Classy mentioned earlier, you know, you work all day in the business and you're there in the trenches. And the last thing you want to do probably is come home and spend multiple hours again in the evening going through the financials or the bookkeeping ends and understanding that, or, you know, trying to schedule meetings with your CPA or your bookkeeper to understand everything. But it is so imperative and important that you know and you understand that and you can answer those questions for your banker, your advisors. So not just sending over the reports to your CPA and letting them compile things and then send them back in a tax return or a balance sheet or profit and loss. Because the biggest thing is, you know, that challenge we're seeing is business owners, of course, you know, they want to have large gross revenues, but they want to pay the least amount in taxes, and showing losses and writing off things. And, you know, the CPA sends back a tax return and their tax bill is very low and they're happy with that. But that's not always what's going to be in the best interest of the business. And I think we're seeing that right now as those small businesses try to go out and apply for this assistance, and their challenge on showing and providing the right documentation to acquire that assistance. And in some cases, you know, they've taken those losses in order to have that lower tax bill, but now that's what's really hurting them and they can't get the assistance that they need. And it's not only for a situation like we're facing now with the pandemic and needing that assistance, it's also when you're approaching a bank and you want to borrow money, any lending institution, you have to be able to show those profits in black and white on tax returns to show that your business can really support that debt that you're looking to do, whether it's for an expansion or purchasing a business or whatever it might be. So I would just say make sure that you really understand those financials and you're spending time in that and not just in the daily operations.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay.
So our topic today was, you know, is your business bankable and capital growth? So we know that that is hard, or we wouldn't have these conversations so often, but it's not impossible. So I think having gone through a pandemic year and being the beginning of a new year, I think this is the time to just take an inventory and to stop and determine just where you are in your business and where you want to go and where you need to pivot and where you need to stretch. So this is a good time to look at that and then to just take into consideration everything that we talked about, whether you're not ready to approach a bank for a loan, but getting together that business plan and making sure your financials are organized. And if you don't have those relationships, getting those relationships. So if nothing else, just taking the time to invest some time in your business this is just a great time to do that, and to just know that accessing capital is hard, but it's not impossible. And
Absolutely.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful panel, wonderful discussion. I wish we had more time. You know, we can, a lot of us can talk about this for hours. But I want to thank you all for your insights. I know that our small businesses have been provided with some key actions that they can take to become more bankable and to support their business growth. And so again, I want to thank you all. I want to invite Jasmine back to provide some closing remarks and to send us off. Again, thank you so much. Regions Bank, Hope Credit Union, Hancock, Whitney, and Gulf Coast Bank and Trust. Thank you so much for your support and being here. Jasmine?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Classy. And I'll just close really briefly for the sake of time. I just wanted to, on behalf of GNO Inc., thank our sponsors again, Fidelity, specifically the Power Program at Fidelity, as well as Coaxum Enterprises. We're so grateful for the generosity of both of those entities, as well as we want to thank the Urban League for being a phenomenal partner during this effort. You know, we have 2 more webinars to go. This is only the beginning. So if you enjoyed today, please be sure to access the links in the chat. And last but not least, we want to thank all of our all of our participants on the panel, all of the panelists, thank you for your time. And I said last but not least, but this is truly last but not least, thank you to all of you who have participated and who have decided that this information was pertinent enough for you to carve out time in your day to learn more about how you can make your business bankable. We truly appreciate the support as well as your attendance. And that's all. See you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.